A whole box.
That looks nice. We are live, but I think we just started, so there's nobody. You love chocolate? I don't like chocolate. I envy people who do.
What does that even
um,
mean?
I just don't like the taste. It's like the taste of coffee. We live, but I don't know if there's anybody watching. Usually I can see the number of people watching. Um, Cam, do you know if people have come in? Hi, everyone, if you have. Oh, hi. Good evening, everybody. I hope you're well. Happy Sunday. My name is Gaopalalwe, but you can call me Gao. I am the digital campaigns manager and social media manager at RISE Mzansi. I've been here less than a year, but it feels like I've been here 20 years. It's been an absolutely incredible journey. And today we are reintroducing you because the chair and the Gauteng premier candidate is not new to Fireside Chats. She's done this before. I think you were one of the first or seconds to do it last year, hey? And I had
Yep.
just came in. So we thought, it's been a campaign since Feb, hey? I think the last time we calculated, your announcement was around the 5th of or 6th of Feb. Um, and we've had so many more people join us. We've met so many more people, and I have had the pleasure of, being with you on the ground in Gauteng. So we're going to start from the start, just briefly. If you can tell people who Vuyiswa Ramokgopa is, we're going to assume most of the people tuning in don't know you.
With pleasure. One of the things that our more well-trained politician colleagues tells us, Mr. Ghana, is that you must never get tired of introducing yourself when you're a politician. So I'm very happy to go ahead and do that. So my name is Vuyiswa. I was born Vuyiswa Muchekwane. I am a Gauteng native, a third generation Gauteng native, in fact. My parents and grandparents were born in this illustrious province. I am an entrepreneur. I have been in some shape or form for the last 15 to 20 years. Actually, now it's probably going on 20 years. I started my first business in varsity, but that was not like a registered business, but my official first real capital investment business was when I was 23 years old. And so I've been in business in some shape or form since then. I am also a mother of three, and a wife to a certain Mr. Ramokgopa, who is not the electricity minister, in case anybody's wondering. Yeah, other than that, what else? I love reading when I have time. It is honestly my favorite thing to do, because it's also just, I love my alone time and thinking time. And on weekends, for me, it's really about spending time with my family and connecting with people that mean something to me. I'm very into, like, you know, deep, meaningful relationships and interactions, probably more than kind of going out and being out and about these days. But that's because I think I've done my time on the streets of Joburg, and there's very little left more for me to see. So I'm all good. So yeah,
Absolutely.
and I think that's it for personal. The rest people can read on LinkedIn.
I love that. Well, thank you. I think one of the most interesting thing for me as someone who's not a Gauteng native is always to find out how is it like to grow up in Gauteng, guys? Like for a lot of us, we visit, and for me, I spent most of my childhood in the Northwest. And coming to Joburg is to visit, and I look forward in Gauteng to move to the rurals. But like, what would you say was the most interesting thing for you about growing up in Gauteng and also just being a Gauteng native? I wouldn't identify with that.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I think you probably represent the majority of people that I certainly come across. I remember one of the hardest questions to answer when I was younger was, was where's home, or where are you from? And I used to say to people, I'm from here. And they'd be like, yeah, but like, where's home? And then I'd have to be like, no, really, home is here. Um, like my mom is from Soweto, my dad is from Davidton. My grandparents were born in Boksburg and Yeovil, respectfully. So there's no other home I've ever known. So in saying that, I can't really compare it to being anywhere else. But what I will say is that I think growing up in Joburg gives you a certain perspective of the world that is very helpful when you start traveling to other parts of the world and experiencing other parts of the world, because you have an opportunity to interact every day with people of different cultures, people of different backgrounds. And like you say, because people are just always coming in and out, like you, that's always been my worldview, that,
Yeah.
there's just always different types of people around. And so you learn how to engage and interact in different settings and circumstances and code switch and speak different languages and exist in so many different spaces. I think also, of course, you can't talk about Gauteng without talking about, the economics of Gauteng, the fact that it is this like business and economic capital. So I certainly have always grown up with this sense of like just hustle. Like the hustle is always on. Everybody's always hustling. People are on the move. It's interesting because in Joburg or in Gauteng, people always ask you, like when you're in a social setting, the conversation that comes up, people will always ask, what do you do?
Mm.
And I realized when I started like traveling that that's not the norm. In many cultures, in many countries, it's not the norm when meeting people to ask what they do, because it's not a given that people do things.
I get what you mean. It's like
you
a
know,
thing we always ask, yeah.
Yeah, like even in Cape Town, I mean, it's not a norm that people focus on what they do professionally. They talk a lot more about their beliefs, their kind of, that type of stuff. But here it's very much about what you do, always looking for connections, people always trying to be more, get more, do more. And I really resonate with that. I went to varsity in Cape Town at UCT. But I knew before even graduating that Cape Town was not going to be a place for me, because if I really wanted to make something of myself, I had to come back and do it here. So for me, Joburg is a place that represents my spirit in general, and and I think it is one of the most welcoming places. Although it's a hard place to live, it is a hard place to
I was
live.
gonna say that when you said, the first thing you said was the hustling part, and I was gonna say, I think for a lot of us who come here for better opportunities, and at home they look out for us to see what we're gonna achieve, it is exhausting sometimes, and I think that's
Yeah,
one of the things that sometimes makes us all feel like we need to go live somewhere rural. But as much as
yeah.
I say that, I don't know, because I've been in Gauteng and Joburg for about 10 years. So I'm used to the culture, I'm used to the vibe and the life. And I think a part of me just loves the hustling, I guess. I've gotten addicted to it.
You definitely cannot go live somewhere remote and rural. I think your energy and just where the frequency that you vibrate on requires you to be in a place like Joburg.
Oh man, it's very interesting. And what would you say kind of pushed you? Is it obviously the vibe you talked about of like it being the hustling place, but what made you so confident, to start your own business, especially in high school? I mean, in varsity, not high school. And what would you say that experience was like for you?
Well, I actually come from like my mom has worked for herself since the early 90s. She was in the advertising industry, and she left full-time employment to start her own business in around 1996, partially because she said she wanted to manage her own time and have more time to actually be with her children and like come to school events and things like that. But also, she saw an opportunity and felt that she could, take advantage of that opportunity. But that really gave me an opportunity to have a front row seat to what it looks like and feels like to be your own boss, to run your own business. And I suppose growing up in that environment made it a much easier thought process for me. I don't come from. My father also was an actor. He still is. He's an artist. So we never really had kind of stable income and worked in a salaried environment. So that was just the world that I grew up in, and I suppose on that basis, I've always had a little bit of an appetite for risk and a tolerance for risk. And it is largely inspired, I think, by my parents. But also, I suppose it helps. I'm also a creative person. I think. Again, because of my sort of genetics and the fact that I've been allowed to pursue my interests in that regard, I'm a person who's always looking for ideas, coming up with ideas, and problem solving. Like, I'm a chronic problem solver, which is probably what led me into politics now. But up until now, I just have always been interested in solving problems. And where I see, they say the other side of a problem is an opportunity. And if you can turn that opportunity into a commercial opportunity, then even better. So I just gravitated towards entrepreneurship. I've always gravitated also towards, like, how do I put it? I suppose autonomy and being the master of my own destiny. And I always found it difficult to be in a very structured kind of corporate environment. So yeah, it was less a decision and more kind of like, just, this is who I am and what I gravitate towards. And when I was 23, I think it was actually easier to make that decision because I didn't have so I had no responsibilities, and I could technically take those types of risks. I think it does get harder as you get older because there's a lot more things to consider. But as I'm saying, that's just kind of who I am, and I think I'll always be that way inclined.
I love that you said that, you find it actually interesting that you said you struggle in a structured corporate sort of environment because the perception out there is that you are from corporate, so you thrive in corporate. So I find it
Oh,
very interesting that you said, I'm actually a creative. And that's, I think, something that a lot of people probably don't know about you, that you are a creative. Whenever we are outside with Vuyiswa Ramokgopa, she's always dancing and finding new things for us to do and coming up with different ideas. So I love that you said that. And I think one of the things that people ask a lot is, who is this person? Why should we believe that she's our leader? What were you doing before RISE? What kind of work were you into before you actually decided to join this organization and this movement?
so yeah. So I mean, immediately before coming into RISE, I was running my own company, which is called AWIP, African Women in Property, is what it stands for, and it was a commercial property investment company. And in a way, actually, it was my form of activism because I had spent the 7 years prior to that working in a nonprofit advocacy organization that was trying to drive transformation in the property sector, called SIBIB, the South African Institute of Black Property Practitioners. And one of the things that came up constantly in the discussions around transformation and transforming the sector was the lack of access to capital, and specifically equity capital, amongst Black investors, male, female, young, whatever, but just across the board, because we don't generally, come from backgrounds where we just can accumulate substantial amounts of capital, or be able to have other properties and things that we can use as collateral when we go into investments. And so that became a big topic. And for me, it was a problem that needed solving. And so my partner and I formed this company, AWIP, and the purpose of AWIP is to create a platform for collective investment. So essentially, we realized that there are amazing investment opportunities out there. There's a lot of money out there, but there's not really a way to bring it to each other. So when Gao wants to potentially, if Gao dreams of one day owning a shopping center or investing in a shopping center, she doesn't know the people that even sell shopping centers or like where these deals are done and how it all happens. Not to mention, she's probably only got like 50,000 Rand or something at most that she could have immediate access to. But there could be like 10 house, and 10 house could have 500,000 Rand. And then that becomes quite significant equity if it's brought into the kind of a vehicle that enables that type of investment. And so my partner and I sat down and we realized, look, we have access to a lot of the opportunities. We know people, we know groups of women that are investing. Let's bring them together. And so our whip was formed, and we have had we actually had some good success from the onset, because I think people really responded to what we were trying to do. My involvement in RISE has definitely put like the brakes on my ability to grow that business and work on it, in the way that I was, but it is still going, and my partner has been the one who's been running it. And before that, even, I have run and started and stopped a number of different types of businesses. I've had events. I was in the events business at some point, running a company called The Weekend Social, where we were doing like monthly lifestyle and brunch events all over Gauteng, mostly in the inner city. And I ran that company with my friends. Actually, we started it with a capital contribution of 250 Rand each, so that we could go and register the company and like make some logos. And it ended up being a multi-million Rand entity that was, hosting large events every month, and getting massive sponsorships and all of that. So, and as I said, my first business was in the retail fashion space. I owned a clothing boutique. And that was after I'd had some time working actually as a retail buyer in the corporate space. So I've kind of like, touched and tasted a few different industries. And, but in all of it, I think the consistent thing for me has always been the value that I can bring into that scenario, and also just where I've seen opportunities and where I've seen that, I could be the best person to act on that opportunity. So that was me before. That's a very truncated version because we don't have all night. But yeah, basically that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, I find it very interesting. And I mean, how challenging was it? And I want to go particularly to your experience of, running these companies, being part of these companies as a woman, in the industry. Would you say, I mean, I'll give you the floor to just tell us how challenging and what were the things you thought were successes for you? I know you've touched on it a bit.
Look, I think that the challenges that I experienced were not necessarily unique to what I'd say the female experience. I will say, though, that when we were in the events business, that was a space that was interesting for us because it is such like a male-dominated space. Even just like at the time, kind of club culture and party culture was very male orientated. Even these things of like girls getting in free before a certain time, and like people buying bottles and all of these things that we just didn't subscribe to. And we kind of had to think. And I remember when we started the company, I had just had my first child. It was 2012. And one of the things we were trying to solve for was like, I was still relatively young. I was mid-20s. I wanted to be able to go out and have a good time, but I also wanted to be able to like mother my child, and have a full functional day the next day. So we said, okay, let's throw day parties, and let's actually have parties that start and end by 8 p.m. at night. We are home, we're back home, we're in bed, we're tucking our children in, and we are ready and available at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. when they wake up the next morning, And so it was really thinking about that and bringing that into our thinking around how we structured the events, creating also safe spaces for women, because when you're out in public spaces, those are not necessarily safe spaces for women. In fact, they're like very patriarchal and like just toxic masculine spaces in many instances. And so we had to think about those cultural dynamics and kind of say, how do you create a space that is inherently equitable and inherently safe, and where women can feel free and liberal to do what they want to do? And what you realize is it also liberates the men in the room too, because now they also don't have to be buying the shampoo and doing all kinds of crazy things. They can just be and have conversations and have a good time. And we actually did something amazing at the time, I think. And we changed, I think, a lot around the culture of eventing in the city. And at the time, well, certainly as far as I knew, it wasn't happening, in the way that we were doing it. So I think for me, it's been less. It's always challenging to be in the business environment when it's not necessarily like created in your image, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But I think the responsibility that we have, therefore, is to walk into these spaces and not conform. We have to walk into such spaces and mold them to our image. And that's what I certainly have tried to do in whichever space that I've been in.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you use the word equitable. I've always said we meet people where we are. I love the word way more than I love the word equality. No shade to RISE. This is vision statement. But I love the word equitable more. And I wanted to ask there's a quote that says, when we have children, we are reborn. How would you say motherhood changed you? Did it have any significant, of course,
Woo! Yes.
perspective? What would you say motherhood did in you?
I know it sounds like a cliche, but motherhood literally saved my life. Like, it literally saved my life. Becoming a mother at the time that I did uh, saved my life because it completely sharpened up my priorities, and things become a lot simpler. Like, your tolerance for nonsense is like this small when you are now responsible for another human being. um, your decision making, certainly for me, I was able to be a lot more decisive about the direction that my life needed to take to be able to give this child the life that they deserved. And I started reflecting a lot even about my own life, and the fact that my mother, despite having been a single mom for the majority of my life, and self-employed for the majority of my life, had somehow managed to cobble together enough, resources and been able to create stability for us, keep a roof over our heads, keep us fed every day, put us in good schools. And although she complained the whole way, but the point is she still woke up and did it. you know, uh, and I just developed a deep appreciation for that, because when you now have your own child and you have to start grappling with the cost of school fees and medical fees and there's like no break. Like, sometimes I'm like, can't we just have a year of break, like maybe between grade 4 and 5, Nyana? Just take a year off just to gather your coins again, regain your financial.
Recharge.
But
Because
you don't have that. Like, once we're on, we're on, and also you are so now under scrutiny, because everything that you are is like the template for someone else, and how the lens through which they are going to be forming their own identity, forming their own values and beliefs. And so you have to start getting really deliberate and intentional about how you show up all the time. And yeah, so it definitely sobered me up figuratively and literally, I suppose, because it gave me a sense of like, okay, girl, you need to focus now and really work on your dreams. Um, and just as an interesting anecdote, the other day something relatively exciting happened. So I mentioned that I think I was talking about it on Twitter. So I had contributed a chapter to a book that was published last week, and I was going to the book launch. And so that evening, I was leaving the house and saying goodnight to my son, who is now 12. And just as I was about to exit the door, he turns to me and he says, "I'm really proud of you, Mom. Like, well done." And I was like, "Whoa, I've done something. This child is proud of me. What?" And it felt so good to it's silly, but it felt so good to know that my child is proud of me, and that when all is said and done, at least I've made him proud and I'm making them proud, and that means a lot. So yeah, so those are the types of little mom moments that one has, and I wouldn't trade it
Mm.
for the
I love it because we spend so much time doing other things. And often, especially as mothers, we feel so guilty because we feel like we're eating at their time. And then
yeah.
they tell us how proud they are of us. And I feel like it's a deserving moment because they see us. Because we tend to always forget that we're not only there to take care of them, but we're also there to show them to go for their own dreams, to go for their own, they learn from us how to be. Tell us about the book. We can't miss that moment. What is it about? And what's your chapter about?
Quite silly that I don't have a copy of it here, but anyway, it's actually a book that's been put together by Prof. Raymond Parsons, who is a well-known academic and writes a lot about politics and economics. He's actually an economist. And he's brought together a number of different thought leaders across different sectors, business, a lot of academia, some political analysts, and I think I'm the only actual politician in there. And the book is called Turmoil Beyond 2024, Turmoil or Reform. And it's a reflection from all these different people. And I suppose in some way, people looking into the crystal ball about what will happen beyond 2024, and what are some of the things we can start to already put into place and do differently as we reflect on a changing world and a changing country and a changing political economy.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's an amazing compilation of thoughts from a number of different people. My particular chapter was looking at driving socioeconomic change from the bottom up, using grassroots kind of organizing and coming up with solutions from the bottom up, which, as any RISE person would know, is core to what RISE Mzansi is about, but also very much, I think the direction that we need to be going in as a country, and looking a lot more on how we can encourage participation in our democracy, and also how we can build the kind of economic institutions that are a lot more bottom up and community owned and driven. For example, taking even things like Stockfels, but like how do we take that to the next level and actually build like a functioning kind of financial system on similar principles? And I think there's a lot of really interesting. I won't give it all away because I think people
yeah,
must read. But I think there's some interesting models to explore about how we can look at our various, challenges, be it economic inclusion, deepening participation in democracy, and look at models from grassroots organizing that exist and that people are using and doing every day. But ourselves as future policymakers need to start thinking about how we can scale that up and enable, that type of a thing rather than stamping it out.
yeah. I love that because a lot of us think it's impossible. And like you said, there are actually existing. examples of that and how we can actually achieve it. There's something that's been happening that wasn't happening the first time you did Fireside Chats. You keep saying
Okay.
and referring to yourself as a politician. It is so interesting and so new. I am so impressed. I'm like, I've been listening to you and I'm like, we are here.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
want to know
Listen,
more into that. I love it. When did that shift happen for you? Before we even talk
no,
about Rise, but where do you
sis,
feel that shift happen?
listen. After like, what is it, 3 months of pounding pavements, shaking hands, talking to people, and just doing political work every single day. Um, I think I've now accepted and internalized what it means to be a politician. But also more importantly, I think I've defined it for myself.
Hmm.
Whereas I think the discomfort one may have had previously was because you were framing that word in relation to other people and in relation to, everything that is toxic and broken about politics. But I have had the pleasure and the experience, and I have experienced the beauty, in fact, of political work, which is, and I always say to people, politics is a contact sport. You just have to be there. You have to be in the ring. You have to look people in the eye and feel their pain and talk to them and understand, what they're going through. And your job is to be able to facilitate, to enable those conversations, to help come up with solutions, but moreover, be able to provide people with a sense that there is a way forward and that there is something that lies beyond all this despair.
Yeah,
And fortunately, it's an industry that attracts some of the worst people, people who are just doing it for power and for themselves. But it also has a potential, and I've found it to be a really healing space and to do work that is deeply like transformative and healing and beautiful. And so I am a proud politician right now. And I think it's an honor actually to be able to serve people in this way.
yeah. I love it
Yeah.
because having been with you on the ground, the minute you said, I've been pounding pavements and doing politics and knowing what politics is, I immediately thought politics is the people and it's being with the people and it's the pact with the people. And I think that's what the journey has been for us for a couple of months.
Yeah.
And before that, I mean, it didn't start when you were announced as the premier candidate. It started way
Yeah.
before. But I think the last few weeks have shaped what politics truly needs to look like and should be. We post a lot of pictures. We post a lot of, videos. What is it that you do, Vuyiswa Ramokgopa, when you're on the ground? What exactly do you do?
Yeah, good question. So my week, I generally have I'd say a 6.5 day week. Um, and every single day well, on Sundays, generally we come up with the program for the week, or we finalize the program for the week, where we will identify the locations that we will be going to. And obviously within those locations, identifying which key groupings, constituencies we need to be meeting with. And sometimes it's a function of an issue that we've picked up on that we want to engage the community on. Other times it's purely exploratory, where we go to a place not knowing necessarily what the issues are there, but wanting to just seek an understanding and to engage with people in the know. So we do a number of different things. Generally, we're either doing like just visibility kind of stuff where a group of us are going out and making a big hoo-ha like we did yesterday in Soweto. We had a big motorcade. We were in all the major shopping centers, handing out flyers, talking to people and just getting the name out there. And we do that in different locations all over. We also have much more We have street meetings where we will literally sometimes put up a gazebo on the corner of a street and convene 10 people, 15 people to have a conversation and discuss a particular issue for about 30 minutes to an hour at most, and allow a lot of engagement. And we also meet with particular groupings of people. So sometimes we'll meet with community policing forum, or we will meet with a local business association to try and unlock some of the blockages that they are dealing with. And then we also run little campaigns, joining the organizers and volunteers who are signing people up every single day. I mean, they wake up and do that work every day, whether I'm there or not. And so sometimes we'll just helicopter in, join their work, and just do the door-to-door, knocking on people's doors, finding out, if they would be willing to give us their support, educating them about what RISE Mzansi does. It's a lot of work in the sun and in the wind and sometimes the rain. I've really come to appreciate my sunscreen and my cap. But it's just very necessary, because what you'll often find is people maybe have seen RISE Mzansi somewhere, or they heard about it somewhere, but it's the actual touching you and having a conversation with you that switches it on for them. So every day is just about making contact with as many people as possible. And I think it's helpful to do it this way, because when you're just hosting big events, and I don't have a problem with big events, they must happen every now and then.
I was about to ask you, when are you feeling FNB?
Something, feel something. I love it. And people say we can't even fill a classroom, and I'm like, you're so silly. Fill up something, So anyway, no. Well, for us, that's not the stage that we're in. It's actually relatively easy to fill something up. You just organize transport, and there's enough unemployed people who would be more than happy to attend a free event. That's not the hard part. I think the hard part is the work that we're doing, which is engaging people, making them understand what we're about and soliciting their buy-in. And not just that, but ensuring that they become part of this movement on an ongoing basis. So it cannot just be an event. The way us engaging with our voters and our constituents cannot be limited to eventing. It has to be every single day relationship building. And we follow a model of relational organizing. That's what we set out to do. And so we're not there yet. At some point, when the time is required, we'll fill something up. Tomorrow, in fact, we're having quite a significant event where we'll be launching the plan for Gauteng, and we will have a gathering of a number of people actually who are part of our RISE community. So fortunately, we haven't had to go and rent a crowd and do all that stuff. People who are genuinely already part of this movement and are doing the work of building this movement on a daily basis. So I'm looking forward to that. I think it's going to be fun. But indeed, it is about doing the hard work of just changing people's minds. And if I can just say, as an interesting anecdote, often the conversation that we have with people is actually less about RISE, like to RISE or not to RISE. It actually, you have to start a few steps even before that. Because a lot of people you meet have they're just sick of politics. They don't want to hear from politicians. They don't want to hear about politics. They associate the failures of the current governing party with a failure of the system as a whole. And so before you even, the conversation is not even about, why you and not this one. The conversation often starts with, hey, this thing called politics doesn't even work. And so often that's the conversation to have first, and to make people understand that, just because the people that came for us took it upon themselves to ruin everything, it doesn't mean that we should lose hope in the system as a whole. We actually have a great system. We just have poor leaders, and we have leaders who have long vacated their role and their mandate of leading this country. And so the only way we fix that is to get new ones who are willing and able to do the job. And that's what we're here to do. And I think that's a very compelling message that people resonate with.
Yeah. And a lot of the times, people, to me, what I've seen is that people are willing to listen and people want to hear because people are desperate for change. As much as they feel so alienated from the political system, they are listening. And there's something you always do. Tell us about the pen and the book that you take to each community. I've been a journalist for over 10 years. I've covered a number of politicians. I've gone to a number of, community meetings. I've never seen a politicians have a pen and paper or a book. I've never heard a dialogue. I've always kind of heard a one-way conversation, promises and this and that, and people just being left. Well, the one thing that I've seen in Rise that's quite different is I actually have a picture or several pictures of you guys with your books and a pen. And I think it speaks to what you were explaining just now about the way in which we do politics.
Yeah, so I mean, that's interesting to hear that you say that because I did not know. Personally, I haven't been to many political events, so I don't actually know how other people do it. But I think for us, it's always been the norm. Certainly for me, because I just don't have a really great memory. But more than that, it's about the fact that we spend a lot more time in our engagements with communities on the other side. We spend more time listening than we do talking, and you often have to listen to a few different inputs across a range of different topics. And it's important that people be given the time and space to ventilate the issues in their own words, and that you are able to, in responding to their grievances, demonstrate that you have actually heard them, and go through the list sometimes one by one if you have to. And yeah, I mean, honestly, it's something I almost wanted to say, shh, don't talk, don't tell that, because our competitors live on that, they stay taking notes of everything we do. So like, don't don't tell them. But either way, I think it is an important practice, and I actually don't mind if our competitors do it, because I think what we've always endeavored to do as RISE Mzansi is to not just win an election, but to change the way politics is done in South Africa, and to disrupt politics as a whole across the board. So if our presence and our way of doing things can be that disruptive thing, then I'm happy for that to be the case. But in this particular instance, it really is a way of honoring the people who have taken the time to be there. As I'm saying, often we meet on the corner of a street, people are standing in the sun. We don't have food, we don't feed people always. Actually, we hardly ever do, because it's usually a quick meeting. And they arrive and they are able to be open and often sometimes very vulnerable with us. Sometimes people will cry and they will leave themselves, in the room. And it's a way of honoring that, and demonstrating that we actually do take them and their time seriously. And the book is also, I suppose, part of also documenting the journey, because when we then come back to the table, like when we were busy drafting the plan for Gauteng, I was able to go back to that book and refer to some of those actual quotes and those actual stories and the actual things that people have said to us. And I can confidently stand on a stage right now and tell you how people think and feel. Like I'm not even, yeah, I'm very comfortable that we have a thorough sense of what people are dealing with in this province, because we have taken the time to listen and we have taken thorough notes in that process.
Yeah. I know we are a collective and we always talk about we,
but I want to shine.
Yes.
We talk about but I want to shine. And I think it's important also throwing forward to the GP plan tomorrow. It's important to reflect on your leadership. And I want to think of a moment that I'm very proud of to be led by you, even if I'm not a politician, but being part of this organization. It has been your ability to say, regardless of us not being in power, we have to go back to people. We can't sit with people, talk with people, know that they're struggling, leave them with their problems and not come back. People don't know the story around the ESCOM picket and how it came about. And I know that's very close to you, because you called me and you said, we need to tell the story correctly. We can't just, post about it and not tell the story. And I think, tell us about that moment for you. And I know it's not the one moment in this journey that has been important, but you guys went to Ivory Park. What was so important for you that you guys go back to that community?
Yeah, so I mean, our first, let me say, touch point with that community was through one of our organizers who actually lives in Ivory Park, and across the street from him is a children's home that houses more than 20 children. I think there are about 23 children, um, ranging from ages like from age 2 to 20, 24 or something, the oldest ones are like proper adults, but they still live there because they have nowhere else. And when we first visited this home, I mean, the lady who runs the home is just, it's just honestly just a person with a big heart who has a heart for children and has a heart for the community, doesn't receive any state funding, but has managed to, rustle up whatever donations she could get, and has managed to keep this place going and put food on the table for these kids for the last however many years. So when we came, we were astonished to find out that she had been without electricity for close on 6 months. At the time when we first came, I think it was 4 months. And she told us this, and I was horrified, but it wasn't so much yes, lack of electricity is inconvenient. But when she explained it, she said, in winter or when it's cold in the morning, kids have to wake up, they have to bath. So they need hot water. So she has to send these kids down the road, like holding pots and buckets and things. And the neighbors have been quite accommodating, those who do have electricity. She has to send them down the road to go and get hot water from the neighbors' houses at like 4, 5 a.m. to then be able to come home to like wash themselves and get ready for school. And I just thought to myself, this is so ridiculous. Like, it's so horrendous, actually, that, I mean, I just think of myself and having to wake up. I'm an early riser, but nobody wants to be out and about in the street on a cold winter's morning, 4, 5 a.m., hauling a bucket of water down the road just so you can take a shower. And this is not like a couple days. It's life. It's life for them for the last few months, only to find that it's due to a transformer that hasn't been fixed. It's a simple enough issue. So we said, all right, let's amplify. We took the issue on and we thought, let's see what we can do to amplify the issue. We wrote to the city council. We wrote also to the premier's office directly, because we know that they've been running a program to actually fix transformers. And we wrote to ESCOM directly. We didn't receive any responses in the allocated time. And so after various attempts at escalating, we realized the only thing we could really do was to go and picket and make a big hoo-ha about it, which we did. And the community got right behind us. They also came out in their numbers. They were right behind us and keen to see us take the issue forward, we did. And what was interesting is we did our picket, I think, on a Thursday afternoon, and handed the memorandum to the ESCOM leadership on a Thursday afternoon. Incidentally, it was the same day that the new ESCOM CEO was starting work, but coincidence. And on the Tuesday following that, we then opened up the news and saw our premier current premier of Gauteng, doing a whole big tralala in Ivory Park and a whole big event of them now switching on transformers and making a big deal about it a couple days later, which was great. You know what? Ultimately, we want the community to benefit. And ultimately, the fact that we could raise awareness for this issue and have it be dealt with so quickly is what we want to see. And so I always say to people that we don't have to wait to be in government to start to make a change. Our job is to use the platform that we have to be a voice for the community and for the people that we represent and that we serve. And we can do that with one seat. We can do that with no seats. We can do it with one seat. We can do it better with 10 seats or 15 seats. But the work of RISE Mzansi doesn't start and stop with an election. Because we are constantly embedded and rooted in communities, and we're constantly ideating and working with communities on how to solve and unlock blockages. And some of it will involve having to make big demonstrations, like maybe doing a picket. But there are other things that are, let me say, that require less. Sometimes it's actually just about organizing the community and getting them organized in a particular way. I mean, another example, when we were in Innerdale, and we met with a community that was complaining about the fact that there was long grass, the big field that they have there was grass that hadn't been cut, the city wasn't cutting it, etc. They were also complaining that that there were a lot of young people who were unemployed. And so I asked the question and I said, but what if we get these unemployed people, young people, to cut the grass? How could we not facilitate something there? And we suddenly saw people's eyes switching on and they were like, actually, yes, that's not a bad idea. And the best part for me was they didn't even ask RISE Mzansi to solve the cutting issue. They said, you know what, actually, we know someone who's got equipment. We're going to reach out. We're going to get the guy to give us the equipment. Great idea. Well done, RISE Mzansi. And sometimes that's all it's about. It's just about organizing people in a particular way, bringing a different perspective and bringing solutions to the table, because that's what people are looking for. They're looking for leaders who can bring solutions, who can, bring a way forward. Sometimes those will be things that need legislating or that need a government or a state budget, but sometimes not. Sometimes they just need a bit of lateral thinking and problem solving skills. And I think ultimately that's what leadership is and should be about. No matter where you are leading. I mean, even as a parent, like your job is to just solve problems. People will come to you, place problems at your table, and your job is to solve them. And I think so much more are in public leadership.
And I mean, I think in our journey, I feel like, and having been part of your campaign, the electorate in South Africa is not stupid. People know what the problems are. People know what the solutions could be and should be. I mean, wherever we've been, people will tell you, if we can just get 1, 2, 3, they'll mention the stuff. And I think that has been something I found interesting. They know. And I feel like we've been so disenfranchised that we feel like we don't have a seat at the table of the solutions. And I think that's one thing that your campaign has, for me, shown me that differentiates us as a political alternative, that we give people room and space to be in. What has been some of the problems that for you keep you up at night, or things that people have said so far in your campaign, and things that are an issue that make you toss and turn?
There are a lot. How and I actually often ask myself, like, if one will maybe need to go for some kind of therapy after all of this, or counseling, because you really do hear a lot and see a lot and absorb a lot. But I think some of the hardest things for me and that keep me up at night are just around the scale of disrepair and just dilapidation and neglect that a lot of communities have fallen into. And what I mean by that is like informal settlements and the proliferation of informal settlements. We're in informal settlements all the time now, but every time I walk through one and you see the thousands of people that live there, and you think to yourself, how and when will we ever resolve this issue? How do we realistically create a better world for these people? Because it's very hard to now unscramble the egg when there are thousands of people now, residing in an informal settlement. And actually doesn't always have to be that informal. I mean, we were in Alex just 2 days ago, and walking through some of the, those small, tiny little streets, and seeing how Alex has evolved over time, and the massive, just the number of people that live there, the number of families that live there. It is overwhelming to consider that if we really want to give people humane, decent living conditions, we're going to have to do something very dramatic. And it's going to require, because if you want to build better dwellings for people, you have to think about where are we going to move? How do you move people? How do you then redesign cities and spaces to make them more habitable? And so that's what I really think about a lot. And I think we need to be a generation that commits boldly to the eradication of informal settlements in our lifetime. That is just not any way for anyone to be living. And we need to throw everything at it. And I worry about just having the legislative room and, the fiscal room to be able to do that. But yeah, don't have to solve every problem today, but it is something that certainly keeps me awake at night. And then I also think about just other things, like obviously the scourge of drug addiction and drug abuse. Couple that with alcohol abuse in our communities. And, and I think alcohol is even more insidious because it's so, let me say, socially acceptable, and therefore people don't even classify it as a drug. It's just part and parcel of life, but it's also to blame for so many social ills. And so I think a lot about what we're going to have to do to drive wide scale culture shift and perceptions around things like alcohol abuse, and how we're going to deal with, destigmatizing things like mental health, because a lot of people also fall into drug addiction and alcohol abuse because they may have mental health conditions that have not been adequately dealt with or addressed. And then I think lastly, and this is also something that I know we can and must resolve in our lifetime, which is creating true solidarity in society. We live in such a divided society, and I don't just mean divided, yes, physically and otherwise, but I think it really hurts me when I see people making certain statements on social media or on, in comment threads. Like you'll see a video of someone really suffering or something really terrible happening, and then the insensitive comments that come after that. And I always ask myself, where is our humanity? How are you seeing a picture of, or a video of a woman getting abused and beaten within an inch of her life, for example, and then putting a comment that says, yeah, serves her right because she, whatever. And I'm like, we have to have a sense of solidarity and empathy for each other. And I think that requires also quite a very specific approach. It doesn't just happen. You have to live amongst people. You have to be able to walk a mile in their shoes. We have to be deliberate about how we create a much more caring nation going forward, and a nation that has empathy and has perspective more than anything on how our fellow countrymen are living, this journey for me certainly has given me a lot of perspective that there were a lot of things I assumed I knew, but I clearly did not know until I started like walking this journey. But I wish that I wish we could all kind of walk this journey in some way, because it would give us insight into how our fellow country men and women are living, and it would allow us to, all come to the table towards solving some of those problems.
Yeah. I want to bring some of the comments into the room because people are watching. Godfrey Maumela on YouTube says, exactly what I told my colleague on Friday, that RISE Mzansi will continue engaging and helping the community beyond the elections. And I think that's the one thing we always say, that it's a journey beyond. For us, it's not just about May 29, 2024. It's a journey beyond that.
Yeah.
And Sylvia says, I really believe RISE Mzansi is what SA needs for progress in this country. Spread your wings to diverse racial communities. It made me think of, you remember when we went to, I think it was a colored community, and you made a comment about how we racialize politics so much in South Africa. I think we were in Eldorado Park, and we had an amazing reception, and most of the people's issues were very similar to other issues. I don't know if you remember that journey. I think you made that comment.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. And you will, if you just watch politics or listen and you consume politics, I mean, even this spat right now that the DA is like trying to conjure up with RISE Mzansi. The irony is that they're 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 effectively racializing politics and accusing us of racializing politics. But anyway, the point is that the perspective that one will likely have if you're observing South African politics is that that is the sole determining factor for how people vote: race and identity. And I'm not saying it's not a significant factor, but it's certainly not the only one. And when you get into actual rooms with people and you have conversations with them and you are able to talk to people as people, they resonate with what you have to say. Because indeed, many of us are dealing with different versions of the same thing. I don't think there's any resident of this province who feels 100% safe and at ease in this province. We all are victims of crime, even if it hasn't physically happened to us yet, but we live constantly aware of the threat of crime around us in some shape or form. And all of us experience it at different levels and to varying degrees, but we all experience it, we all fear for our children. We want our children to have the best. I mean, I don't know any parent that doesn't want their children to have the best education, the best opportunities, the best healthcare, and whatever the best is that their money can buy, or or that the state can get for them. There's nobody who wants to sleep or live in a house, where they have to wade through half a meter of water, in their living room, or step out of their door and step into sewage water. Nobody wants that. So when you have conversations around those things, and I'm talking about the real things that matter to people, those become much easier conversations to have. And we can all have them. And I think, to be fair, I will say, I think the leaders of RISE Mzansi are particularly well placed to have those types of conversations, because we are so diverse, and because we ourselves, as we sit across the table, are learning and navigating each other, and our different identities and different cultures and ethnicities and age differences, gender differences. We have those tough conversations all the time at our table, and it enables us, I think, to navigate such conversations easier and better when we're out in the world.
And I think it doesn't also mean that we subscribe to the politics of we don't see color. We are South Africans. We understand how we were classified back in the day in apartheid. We understand what that has done to us as a people. And I think one of the things that came out during the convention was the topic around healing and the topic around nation building, which has not been grappled with. And we talk about it as a priority. And it's something we need to talk about as South Africans because it does divide us. And that's why you find that politics becomes about which race votes for who, who belongs to the DA along racial lines, who belongs to the ANC, and it becomes this toxic thing. I like what Katlego was saying. He says, and I think this is something we say a lot, we need to bring back humanity back into the corridors of government and society, because what we have seen and what we experience on the daily basis shows a lack of care. And I think the one word you use the most is neglect.
Yeah. No, definitely. I honestly don't know how, and I'm not even politicking right now. I'm just genuinely reflecting that I don't know how our political leaders live with themselves. I don't know how they live with themselves currently, because when I walk around and engage with the pain that people are experiencing and the way in which they themselves feel so hurt and so abandoned and neglected and just lied to and deceived, I don't know if I would be able to live with myself and if I'd be able to sleep at night knowing that that's what people are saying about me, and that's the feeling that I've given them as a leader in society. So I don't know, maybe call me naive, but I really just don't know how people live with themselves. I know actually that we have incredible people in our country, but there has just been a complete neglect and a complete abandonment of so many communities, particularly obviously lower income or no income communities, because they supposedly maybe have less of a voice. They complain less, they don't have the platforms, etc. But I think that's where we have to double down and do the work. We've got to close that gap, because those socioeconomic divisions, we can't even talk about nation building when two children growing up in the same city, 7 minutes apart from each other, 10 minutes apart from each other, but one is living in the first world and the other one is living, it cannot be. You'll never be able to build a nation until you can close that gap. A child who grows up in Sandton and a child who grows up in Alex cannot have a fundamentally different lived experience of the same suburb, actually, because Sandton and Alex are actually one big thing. And even worse, as I'm saying, when you go across town. So for us, nation building is not just about the Kumbaya story. It's about looking at how we close those structural gaps and the differences and that socioeconomic gap, because that is about creating a shared experience and a shared, let me say, investment in this country. We all need to feel like shareholders of South Africa Inc. Currently, it feels like there are people who are shareholders and they're getting their dividends, and they are getting the dividends of this freedom and this constitution. And there are others who are not. They are waking up every day, doing their bit and getting absolutely nothing out. And we have to close that gap.
Absolutely. Lebogan says, it's very inspiring to see a woman running in the elections. In 2019, the woman's voice mattered a lot because of the scourge of JPV and the activism at the time. Right now, not so much. She reminds me of 2018. I was also part of this big march across all 9 provinces, against GPV. And I think it's also one of the things that comes up a lot. I think we were in Eden Park where I got so hurt when one of the mamas said she can't even go to the toilet because there'll be some guy And one of them even said out loud, we get raped in our homes. So the situation is quite scary.
Yeah.
Lefu says, we are with you, Lady. Keep doing the good work. Yeah. And then Zintle has a question. She says, I have a question for Vuyiswa. I have been following her journey for a while, and I just want to commend her on the outstanding job that she's doing. It's truly inspiring to witness a woman excelling in politics, especially someone as empathetic and compassionate. I think Zintle is still writing her question um, because it ends there. um, there it is, as herself. It's refreshing to see, considering the prevalent self-serving motives often. Zintle still coming. I think,
Let's interpret a young thread there. Thank you,
yeah,
Zinte.
it's a long question. We'll get to it, but I wanted to pick on you because Pasika said Gauteng people would do themselves a big favor by entrusting their fate in Vuyiswa. She's a breath of fresh air, perfect candidate. Should we trust you? Should the people watching, should the people who will be listening trust Vuyiswa Ramokgopa, and why?
It's a big one. Look, it's a hard one to answer. Obviously, if you ask me, I will say yes, you should trust me. But if I had to say why, I would say that why you should trust me is also a big part of it, also speaks to my why and understanding why I'm here. You know, I didn't come into this space, and by the way, when I say come into this space, I was one of the founding members of RISE Mzansi. And none of us came here and arrived at this point because we had nothing better to do, or because we were looking for positions, or because we had, unresolved issues we needed to solve. Like many of the other leaders at RISE Mzansi, I came here out of a deep sense and understanding that if people like me don't do anything, if people like me just sit on the sidelines and complain and don't do anything, then we will never be able to change the status quo, and we'll never be able to attract more people like me into this world and into this work. So I think it's very important when assessing leaders, not just me, any and all leaders, to really understand why they're here, what brings them here, and more importantly, and I'm trying to say this in a nice way, but it's very important to have leaders who have options. Because recently, and I don't like to name names, there was one politician who was excluded from a list of the governing party. And I found it astonishing. And he's relatively highish on the list. And he has appealed that decision, which is the decision to exclude him on the list. He's appealed it in the court. He's taking it to court. But his appeal to the court was that if he does not get this job, if he's not on the list, he's not in this political party, he basically will not be able to make a life for himself. He won't be able to earn a living, and he won't be able to have a livelihood. And I found that very concerning. I said, somebody who is an MP should have at least some skill that he can sell or leverage in the open market. Anything. Like, he should be able to, offer something to the world and the economy to be able to make a living. Being an MP should not be your only option in life, such that if you don't have this job, you can't do anything else. Well, names are expensive, so let's not name names, but if you read the news, you'll know who I'm talking about. So this was my concern, and I juxtaposed that against another story about the former mayor of Gauteng, whose name I will name, Mpho Phalatsi, who, upon losing her position, has since gone on to open 3 more practices. She's gone back to medical practices. She's fine. She's carried on with her life. She's probably not done with politics, and I hope she's not. But the point is, she has options. And I think we need to try and look for leaders and scrutinize that aspect and find leaders and look for leaders that have options. Because it's the ones that don't have options that are willing to do anything it takes to hold on to those positions or to stay in those positions where they're able to have access to power and privilege and state procurement. And I think that's where things start to go really wrong. So I will say, trust me, because I have options, but more importantly, because I choose to be here. I choose to be here because I truly, truly believe that this is the work that has to be done right now, not because I'm here to try and make a career for myself.
The obsession with positions. I think Zintle's done. And I get her question. She's saying, we are all aware that men still dominate the political sphere. Do you believe that the primary reason for this lack of interest from most women to be in politics is systematic failures to provide them with opportunities to thrive in this field? I identify with that because I came in and I was like, I know I'm just operations, I'm not a politician, but am I really skilled to do this work? Should I be here? Do I belong here? Do I know what I'm doing? And I think a lot of women would identify.
This is a brilliant question, Zinhle, and I'm glad that you took the time to type it. It's a massive question that I grapple with myself often. And I'm going to answer it in 2 ways. The first part of the answer to your question, which is sort of what is the reason that we don't see more women getting involved? Yes, I do think it's partly systemic, but I also think it's partly, let me say, the culture of politics and how modern politics has kind of evolved in our time, which, one, it's very adversarial. 2, it's very it's very much about amassing power and being able to sort of play those power games. And like I said earlier, it's actually become a lot less about like serving people and actually doing the things for serving people. And so I think those types of elements say that the spaces in which we organize and the spaces in which we politic tend to be spaces that I'd say are more male orientated or more comfortable for men to be in. I mean, a simple thing, like I was watching, just watching Parliament. It was actually one of the council meetings recently where big fight broke out in the council meetings. People's shirts were coming off, people were punching each other. And I was putting myself in that scenario and thinking, now, as a woman sitting in a council where people are like physically fighting each other, this is so counter to my natural disposition and my dispute resolution disposition. And my natural instinct would be to shy away or to step back from that type of a scenario. I'm not the one who's going to be jumping in and getting in the fight. And to operate in an environment that kicks out those kinds of behaviors requires you, I think, to tap into a very different side of yourself as a woman. So the short answer is that I do think there are systemic things. I think that the way we do politics results in a lot of women being repelled by politics. And actually a lot of women spend a lot more time and gravitate towards like the NGO sector or civil society, where we can be more involved in solving, community problems, issues, and actually doing the work, just getting on with the work without necessarily needing the power and the positions. But the problem is the problem actually is that reinforces the exclusion of women. So I think at some point we have to swallow the pill, get in the room, but make sure that when we're in the room, we are very intentional about changing how the rules of the room work. And as I said earlier, not just assimilating. And we've been very intentional about that at RISE Mzansi. Like, as the women of RISE Mzansi, we've been very intentional about, not just the women, by the way. In fact, I think we have some of the most progressive men that I've encountered in my whole life at RISE Mzansi and as part of the leadership of RISE Mzansi. They are so progressive and they are so sold on this idea of gender equity, that we've created spaces and a model of operating that is just a lot more equitable. And you see it because in our events, even our protests, we have babies and children that come to those settings. Women bring their children to those settings. We've created spaces that are a lot more conducive and friendly for women to just be themselves. And it's not to say we're not adversarial, but that is not the nature of how we engage with each other on a daily basis. We've chosen a method of engagement, again, that allows a lot more discourse. So when we sit in these forums, community meetings, whatever, we give people time to talk, to input, to deposit their thoughts. And you notice actually in the beginning, usually it'll be like one or two of the men that will start and then women will come after. But once they start, you can't stop them. Then they pile in and so it's about creating those spaces that are really a lot more intentional about elevating women's voices and making sure that the space itself is conducive for women, the environment, etc., etc. And look, I don't think it'll always be the case. I think that if there are enough of us that make the jump into politics and are able to whilst we're there, make the necessary changes, I think we'll see a big shift in the next few years. Certainly, I've been inspired by other women who've gone into politics, and I hope that seeing people like, Faiza, Esther, myself, Gao, and so on will also inspire other young women who have an itch and a desire to change this country to jump in the ring with us.
Absolutely. It's also interesting because the voting power in this country is women. There's so many more women who make it to the polls and who will go to the polls. So we need to, and I mean, we talked about motherhood. We talked about so many things that are political. I feel like every single thing is political. Motherhood is political. Our lives are political. And if we want South Africa to be different, we have to be part of it. It is scary, though. It is scary to be part of politics, especially because of the history of politics in this country. I think of political killings, even in KwaZulu-Natal. I think a lot about Nonkululeko Hlongwane Mhlongo. Kolisi, I think, added to the should we trust you, and he says, Vuyiswa is a leader that wakes up at 3 a.m. to be with community patrollers without a media because she understands leaders lead by being practical, not being celebrities. I salute V. I love that because you probably won't know this, but I got the video recordings and the quality wasn't really that good, right? So I sat with the videos, and people must go watch the patrol video because the thing about it is it wasn't a planned production. It's not like we went there and we're like, lights, camera, action, let's show off, And I sat with these videos and I was editing them and I was finding ways like so that people can see, because I really thought as much as it wasn't a big production, for me, it was also just about highlighting the work that patrollers are doing because of lack of police action. It wasn't just about Vuyiswa was there, so let's put it out, but it was really about the work because I found the footage so interesting and people can find it on your Instagram page. It's her name and surname. And how was that experience for you before we close and let you go finish?
It was
tomorrow.
It was incredible how I was so inspired. I mean, I'm an early bird in general, but yeah, not like that and not every day, and those guys they do that every single day. In fact, the one guy who was kind of leading the tour says he starts work at 1 a.m. and his shift starts from 1 a.m. till about 7 a.m. They patrol all night, and then 7 a.m. they they go help the kids cross the street and do the, they, what does they call it? Like traffic controlling, basically, to help kids cross the street and get to school. But the work that they do is, it's incredible. It's 100% on a voluntary basis. They don't earn salaries. They work on a basis of donations. These are community members. Most of them, they're men and women also. Most of them over the age of 50. So and it's amazing. They really, they risk their lives, literally. I felt like I was in an episode of Sizok Tall, because you are like roaming the streets, and we did a drug bust where we went to one of the drug houses where people had been complaining that there were people there taking drugs and terrorizing the community. And ultimately, I think what's the saddest part for me was that they get no support. When the government, in this case, the premier, decides he's going to do an intervention, he goes and hires amapanyaza and puts people on a stipend. He doesn't go and look and say, who's actually doing this work already in communities, and how do I elevate and support the work that's already being done? No, they go and fetch people who don't even live in Alex. Go and fetch people who don't even live in Alex, aren't even trained or equipped to do the work of crime fighting. They go and train them. They give them BMWs and uniforms and whatever. These people, the crime wardens, don't even do 30% of the work that these community patrollers do. They work a 9 to 5. 6 p.m., they're gone, Baba. They're not doing nighttime patrolling and stuff. And they're coming the next day to ask how things went, etc. They also get, even the police. We walked around with these people for 4 hours. I didn't see one policeman patrolling the streets. I didn't see one police car driving past us the entire time. When we got to the police station at 6 a.m., there were police cars. They were all parked in the yard. And so for me, there's something that's really broken about the system. But it also shows me that the problems that we have are not complex. They are really not complex. It's just we don't have leaders who are able to genuinely apply their mind to problem solving and put resources where the interventions are actually going to yield the biggest impact. Because ever since the patrollers started, the crime rate in Alex has dropped dramatically. Alex police station has now gone from being red to green, which basically means it's like a low crime area. Imagine that. Imagine Alexandra being classified as a low crime area. And then sadly, and I don't know if I don't think it was one of the guys that we engaged with, but this was Friday that we went patrolling. Saturday, I read in the news that there had actually been an incident of one of them getting killed on Saturday morning whilst trying to intervene in an incident. So, it's high risk work. They're putting their lives on the line, but it shows me that this thing that people are just, waiting for handouts from government, and South Africans are all lazy and, disaffected and disengaged. I know for a fact that that's a lie. The other thing I wanted to tell you, which was like the most amazing thing, whilst we were patrolling, we also passed by women who were cleaning the streets. So also voluntary basis, 4:30 a.m. they are awake sweeping the streets. Because I was trying to figure out, why are the streets so clean? No litter, no nothing. And these are, again, community members who are waking up and doing the work that the council should be doing, the city should be doing, of actually cleaning the place and making sure that basic service delivery is done. It's not being done, so the community is doing it, which is beautiful. But it's also unfortunate that where there is available, it's not getting used to support these types of initiatives.
Yeah.
Listen, I'll give you a short answer, Lebo, on the Nasi span. Very simple.
Oh, you see the questions? I thought we've hidden the
I can see the questions very clearly. Very quick. I think it's a very unfortunate electioneering tactic. And I think it's unfortunate because you're really playing with people's lives. People really do need jobs. People are unemployed. They really, really do need jobs, especially young people, but not limited to young people. And what has happened is that a significant amount of the provincial budget has now been reallocated to the Nasi Spani program. But at the same time, you have a number of non-profit organizations that were being funded by the social development. There's no budget. They've been cut off. So there's like massive gaps now where entire community-based organizations cannot continue their activities because the Gauteng provincial government has cut off their funding. Yet they have money to somehow employ 500,000 people on a stipend. I mean, that's one aspect where budget has been cut. We also know we also know that doctors, there are a number of doctors who are sitting unemployed, unable to be hired, whilst our health system crumbles before our eyes. And health workers themselves are under so much strain because there's apparently no budget to hire any more staff. Yet there's money to go and hire literally like people to stand around in outfits. And I just think it's a shocking use of state resources at a time when we have so many urgent priorities. And I'm not saying crime isn't a priority, but I'm saying that one, crime is crime fighting is not actually a provincial competency. It's a national competency and a local government competency. But number two, even if it were, this would be a very ineffective way to use limited resources. There are a number of other initiatives that the province could be investing in, such as the one I've spoken to, supporting community patrollers, supporting community policing forums, actually skilling and capacitating the police that are already there, and a number of other things. But again, it is an election and votes need to be won. So this is the type of politics we've become now accustomed to.
Yeah. Ezekiel, I think we could maybe address also Ezekiel's question before we close. And it's really about the water in Hammanskraal, but I think we have a water problem across the country to a point where I think we've said is that if we ignore it, it's going to be like the power crisis, actually. He says, what would you do with the situation in Hammanskraal? Because Panyaza and Tshwane have failed to give the people clean water.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, there's kind of, and it's not to defer the question, but the reality is that in terms of how water provision works, it's not a provincial competency at all. So actual provincial government has no direct power and influence into the provision of water directly. That again is a function of national government, and then the various water agencies like Rand Water, which sit under the local municipalities. So the level of intervention that one can actually make as a premier is more around, let me say, oversight and accountability, and ensuring that the actual municipalities themselves are dealing with the issues. And I think that's a role that we certainly need to play, not just as far as the water issue, but broad service delivery in general, because there's a number of other challenges that are local municipality functions and competencies, but where at least as a provincial government, you do have the ability and the mandate to play an oversight role and to hold those municipalities accountable, and to also, of course, raise awareness to national government and so on when they are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. So that's the one element. However, I will say that what is also important to note that our journey as RISE Mzansi doesn't stop now in the national elections. We are contesting on the 29th, like everybody else. And on the 1st of June or the 2nd of June, we start the campaign towards local elections, which will take place in 2026. And that is really where one then is able to now get stuck in to a lot of these much more, practical service delivery issues, because local government is where, we really experience pain as citizens, be it water provision, the state of roads and various other service delivery challenges, crime and grime and all of the things that we're dealing with.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And tomorrow's a big day. We will gather at Beyers Naudé Square in Johannesburg. We are going to go live for the Gauteng Premier Candidates Plan on Facebook. I'm sure you will find the details on our social media platforms, and we will give you guys the link. Vuyiswa, how are you feeling about tomorrow? What can we expect without giving us the plan?
Look, I'm very excited. We've done a lot of work to try and just get into the details of how things work and really understand the levers that need to be pulled to unlock some of our biggest challenges. Without getting into the details of it, but we've really looked at those high level things. So for us, when we talk about wanting to create employment or to do job creation, it's not a pipe dream. We have done a lot of work to kind of look at how can we grow the economy? What are the specific interventions we can make to ignite the economy, and how many jobs can we realistically expect to get out of those interventions, and so on and so forth. And like we're discussing now, even issues around crime and safety, we've been very pragmatic about what is possible from the seat of the Premier's office and within the mandate of provincial government, but been able to still put forward some very practical interventions and initiatives that we can get behind within the first 180 days of governance. So yeah, I've personally enjoyed doing the work and getting to know this province more. I've seen more of this province in the last 8 weeks than I've seen in my entire life as a resident of Gauteng. And I feel really blessed to have had that opportunity, because wow, we have such an incredible province. And it really just needs the right leadership to help turn it around, switch it on, and get it going. And I'm excited to have an opportunity to be that person.
I'm so excited too. I can't wait for tomorrow. Lebo has said, wonderful work, wishing you all the best. Thank you, she said to me as well. And Esther says, can't wait for that. Before I let you go, what can we listen to in the spirit of organizing around joy? What is the 1 or 2 songs that you would like for us to listen to? Recommend. Plus, my playlist sucks. I know yours is vibing.
Weirdly, I'm going through like my Maskandi era right now.
Oh, wow. I love it. I love it.
I'm in my Maskandi era, so I'm listening to Gacheni a lot. Yeah, and there's a song I like called Hit After Hit. That's been on my playlist on repeat. And there's another one by Zwide. It's called Wenhliziyo Yami. So yeah, I'm in my Maskandi phase, and I'd like to put that down as my song of the weekend.
Awesome. I love it. We must be pumping that on our way to Beyers Naudé tomorrow. Thank you so much for your time, especially just the day before a very big day for you. All the best. Like everybody in the comments who has said, we are behind you. We are behind you. We love being led by you, and we love leading with you. So good luck for tomorrow. And again, thank you guys. Follow Vuyiswa on, all social media platforms. She's on TikTok, this lady. She's doing flames on TikTok. She's doing flames on Facebook. She's everywhere. Follow her, follow the plan tomorrow. And like we always say, scrutinize us. Ask us the most important questions. Don't hold back. And yeah, let's build a safe, prosperous, equal, and united South Africa in one generation.
Thank you, Gao. You've been an amazing host.
Thank you so much.
So much.